Welcome back. Time to start trying to get these cases back together. So what I've done off camera is just put the crank back together, and I've put the com rods on and just have dimensionally checked the case distance again. So luckily this crank looked to be exactly the same size as the previous one, so I've been able to use the same size shims. I also checked the movement on the gearbox again as well, just in case it altered by having the crank in, and we've still got the same amount of end play and float. So we're in a position now to start putting the cases back together. So what I've done that you can't see here is I've put build oil in each of the bearings. You can see it here, the red gunk. This is just to make sure that there's a slightly more heavy viscous oil in there, so when you first start the engine up, there's something there for it to lubricate. Thing to do then, we've got to put liquid gasket all the way around the engine case, around here, then around there, and then put these cases together and get them torqued up. So let me just grab the free bond. So this is the free bond gasket that we're going to be using. It's the same stuff that Ducati use, just comes in a slightly different tub because I get it direct. First thing you need to do is just squeeze out some, just to get rid of the oil that sits on the top. And then what we're going to do, just using the back of this, is put a thin bead all the way around. Each bolt hole has to be circled so it doesn't allow any oil into it. Now the important thing to remember when you're doing this is to make sure that the joint has been cleaned. Okay, so what you can see as you look round all the engine, we've got a bead going all the way round. Every bolt hole has been done. The oil catch piece has been done there as well. So that is the engine cases ready to be put together. So effectively all I need to do now is drop the engine case, the other engine case on, which is just all nice and clean. Just make sure there's absolutely no oil on there. So this is the key piece. So what we've got in there then is the gear sets are in there, selector drum with the forks in the correct alignment. We've got the intermediate gear wheel shaft in, the crank and the two con rods. Everything else I can put in afterwards, so it's not an issue because it all bolts on externally. So we're ready to go. Let's just drop this case on and get ready to tighten it. Okay, so the important bits. So got two main engine bolts here, one here, one here, one here, one here. You've then got two 6mm internal bolts that need to be done up, and then uniquely between the earlier and older cases, on the earlier cases there used to be an oil pressure relief valve here. On the later cases you have a hollow bolt that goes in there which has got brown paint on it. Always the last one to torque up because it gets torqued up to a lower figure than the others. So torque settings, 2 stages. For the main engine case bolts around the outside you go 19 Newton meters first, then 25 Newton meters. The 6mm bolts are done to 10, which is all around the outside of the case as well, and then the oil hollow bolt is done to 15 Newton meters. Okay, let's get those done up. Okay, so progress. Cases are together. I'm just going to leave the liquid gasket now just to go hard, and then that will get just trimmed off. So I'm just going to leave it like this now. There's a fair amount of excess on some of the parts of the casing, as you can see. So we'll just get that to dry off, and that'll be good for us to clean up and go. So what's next? So you can see we've got a completely empty side case. So this goes in a logical way to put it back together now. So what we'll be doing is we'll put the gear selector arm, will go in here, then we'll put the intermediate gear on, we'll put the starter reduction wheel in, we'll put the starter in, and then we'll build up the left hand side of the crankshaft, which will be the intermediate drive wheel, then the flywheel coupling, which and the main starter wheel, then a spacer piece, the generator, and the bolt goes on the end. Okay, so progress again at last. Okay, let's get this gear selector arm in. Okay, so in putting the gear selector in, there's 2 ways to do it. So first off is using the official Ducati tool, which that's the part number on there. All you do is place the tool in, so it's just a loose bolt that goes in, and effectively the challenge with doing this with one hand is push the tool up into its position, just have something to locate where the clutch push rod goes in, and this puts the end of the clutch pull the gear selector pull into the right position. But what you'll probably notice is that there's a mark that roughly lines up with one of the selector dogs. The selector drum needs to be in its neutral position, and if it's done there in the correct position, that will all align. So there's 2 ways to do it effectively. You can do it by just aligning this mark with this selector dog, or as I've done it, by doing the correct tool position to put it in. So if I just put that back, so that puts that into the right position there. And then there's two bolts that will go in here. One is a 6mm, one is the 8mm. So let's just get those in there quickly. Right. So this all in place. Because I haven't disassembled this, I don't have to worry about adjusting this to be in the correct position in this arm. But what I will just say, if you've disassembled that, is you are looking for the selector arm to be midway on the actual mount itself. So that just makes sure that this is all balanced in the correct position, and you can do that via this adjuster nut here, but I haven't made an adjustment on there, so and it is halfway between. So this has got to be torqued down to 25 newton meters, i.e. the 8mm bolt, the 6mm bolt 10 newton meters. So we'll just get that done. Okay, what we're going to get now is we're going to get the starter motor and just drop that in, because I'm going to build up the rest of the gears that sit in here. So let's get the starter motor and drop it in. Okay, so what we have is the starter motor gasket, which sort of sits on there. What I like to do is I like to stick a little bit of free bond around as an extra precaution. So I'm going to grab the free bond and stick a little sliver of that on, and then we'll stick that into the motor. Okay, so that's in its position ready to go. So when it sticks up in here, we want to make sure that the connection for the electrical cable points down, because that's its natural resting position. So you'll see that we've got two bolt holes here that we need it to line up with, and one externally. Now, as I said, you don't need to put that flexible gasket material on there. I just do as a safety precaution, just because I take the engines apart more often than a normal person would. So I'm just going to stick that in now. To put the intermediate shaft wheel in, so the first thing we need to do on the crank is the little key in there. We then grab the main timing drive wheel, and you'll see there's a mark on there, which isn't important at the moment, but it will be shortly. That goes in there and sits snugly against there. Then we just need to grab this wheel, so let me get that a second. Okay, so the intermediate timing wheel is onto its shaft with a key in, and we've got this mark here. I've taken off the main wheel because it's easier to align this way round. So you'll see on the main drive gear wheel we've got a mark, that mark there. We just need to get these to align, so if I just turn that round, and you'll see there the lines line up perfectly. What we got to do now is put the rest of the pieces on, and I'll just talk you through the order in which they go on. So the next piece we need to do is put the tabbed washer. You can see there's a little tab on the back which lines with the keyway, so that goes down onto there, and just make sure that's located in properly, and then grabbing the nut, we tighten that down onto there, and we just need to torque that in now. So let's grab a torque wrench. So this needs to get done up to 45 newton meters. Now we just bend the tab washer back over. So that's been peened over so it can't move. You see it's got a nice flat over, and I just edge the two ends of where it's been bent over, and that can just stop any movement. So all we need to do is just make sure that we are still fully lined up. So let's just do rotation, there we go. So that's ready to put the rest of these pieces on. So the parts we've got here is spacer washer, the needle bearing that goes inside the starter gear, the starter gear, the sprag clutch carrier and flywheel carrier, but we're not putting the flywheel on, the spacer piece and its key, which also goes into the generator rotor, and then the concave washer and final nut. So that's the order in which those go in. So let's just put those in there now. So that's the assembly put in, ready for tightening down. So this will go on in a second, tighten down. But as you can see, we've got the starter gear, the flywheel carrier that carries the sprag, we've got the spacer piece because we're using a smaller rotor, the concave washer with the concave sticking up, and then the nut that goes on. I should note that as you go down the engine, let's just pull that back off, there's all marks that line up with the keyway. You can see there's just a mark in there, but that's relatively straightforward because it goes directly onto the keyway. Just get that back in. And that's it, ready to tighten up. Let's get that done. So this needs to be tightened up to 186 Newton meters. What it needs is a small amount of locking compound stuck on the thread, which has been cleaned. So this is all done then on this side. Everything's tightened down. That's done to 186 Newton meters. Everything's all ready. What I'm going to do is leave this side cover off at the moment so that we can do the other side, because we'll need to hold this side again when we tighten down the nut on the other side of the crank. So what I'm going to do is very carefully flip this over, and this will then sit downwards, and we'll do everything that sits on the right hand side of the cases. So first piece we need to do on this side is put the strainer back in that was cleaned. So new washer put on there, and it just drops in. So that's the strainer bolt done in, and what I'll do is I'll just take this out at the last minute and clean it up and put it back in, as I will do with also the sump bolt as well. So what do we need to get done on this side? So we need to build up the belt drive pulleys, we need to put on the primary drive gear, the oil pump needs to go in here, and the primary wheel, which is then allowing us to put the clutch cover on, which will be this side of the engine all fully completed. As you can see from earlier when we stuck the start motor on, we've now got the connection sat down at the bottom, and so everything is starting to come together nicely. Let's get these bits out so that we can have a look at them quickly. Here we go. So what we've got is the primary gear, its spacer washer, the primary drive gear with its key, locking washer, nut. We've got 3 new seals. There you go, one here for the clutch cover, one here for the oil pump, one here for the oil pump. We've got the timing belt drive wheels, and I've got a new sacrificial nut to go on there. The bolts for the oil pump itself, and then the clutch hub bolts and the clutch cover to go on. So let's get this put together. So first thing we've done, little lock-in ring, first key. Then you'll see there's a particular way this goes in. There's a gap on this side that needs to sit over the lock-in ring, like so. Then the first wheel comes in, and again the raised part of the inner circumference needs to sit outwards. So that goes down onto its key. It says, like so. Next key, spacer washer, then back face, then the washer, and we'll get a new nut to go on there in a second. But what I'll do now quickly is just torque the oil pump into its correct position. So the torque settings are 25 Newton meters for each of the 8mm bolts, 10 Newton meters again for the 6mm bolt. Another way you can tighten this is just to lock something in against the gears so that it's got nowhere to turn. 186 Newton meters to tighten this nut down. Okay, a little bit of a struggle getting that done, but that's now fully in place. All I've got to do is just bend this washer up to lock that in, and just grab the special sacrificial nut to go on there as well. Okay, so here's the nut that goes on the belt pulleys. You can see that it's got a unique way of doing it. It's got these sort of bent in parts of the nut that apply torque to it as you turn it down, so they're really a once only use type affair. So we're going to stick that on. Just started bending up the washer. I'm just going to finish tapping that home, so I'll just do that now. Okay, so this uses a special tool to put this on. So it's, you'll see here, it's a this is not a Ducati original tool. This is one I've got off of a aftermarket manufacturer, but it's got unique cutouts that fit just in on that. and this needs to be done up to 62 Newton meters. So let's get that done. So what you can see is there's little filings that have come out just as that's been put in. So that's locked down really nice and tightly now. So 62 Newton meters worth of force, and you can, if we measured those gaps before and after, you could see they were more or less closed before it went on, and they're slightly opened now. So this side's all finished. All that we need to do now is put our cover on. That means we need to do some more instant gasket, and I'll just get the right bolts all together so that we're ready to go, and we'll stick this cover on, and then this is this side of the engine completed. Okay, that's that cover back on. I'm just going to loosely place the clutch hub holding bolts so I know where they are. It's always a little bit easier to deal with these things if they're back in the place they should be. But as you can see, we're starting to come together as an engine now, so all that remains to do is stick the other side cover on, and the bottom end will be built. I've just got to change over the water pump for that, and then we've got a modification to do which I'm going to talk through once we've completed the rest of the engine build, which is to change this from a non-oil cooler engine to an oil cooler engine, because at the moment it's direct feed to the cams, which is not great. These engines tend to overheat their crank and fail a little bit when they're left in that sort of guise. So looking good. I'm going to end that video here. Next video I'll finish off the other side casing, and we'll be in a position to start actually putting the pistons in and start building the top end of the engine as well. So thank you for watching. If you've got any comments, please post down below and I'll answer as soon as I can. Chuck us a like if you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe for further content. Thank you. Bye.